All right, for this explainer, we are opening up a 400-year-old case file. It's a story from Marseille, France, and it's got everything. A charismatic, respected priest, a young noblewoman, and a legal trial where the star witnesses were literally the demons of hell. This is the absolutely wild story of Louis Gaufridy, a man who was put on trial for being the Prince of Magicians. Okay, let's just stop right there, because this quote is the key to everything. To you and me, this sounds like something from a horror movie. But in 1610, this wasn't seen as the rambling of a disturbed girl. No, this was considered direct, legally admissible evidence. It was the recorded testimony of a demon speaking through a nun, and it carried the exact same weight as a sworn witness in court. This one statement kicked off a year-long spiral into a citywide panic that ended in torture, fire, and death. So where did this all begin? Well, our story really centers on two people. First, you've got Louis Gaufridy. He's the popular, influential priest at a major church in Marseille. And then there's his young spiritual advisee, Magdalene de Demandles, who is the daughter of a local aristocrat. Their relationship, which started when she was just a kid, would become the foundation for a crime the court saw as nothing less than supernatural. Now, what's so fascinating here is how the prosecution built their case. This wasn't framed as a simple seduction, not at all. They argued it was a spiritual assault, carried out in 3 distinct magical steps. First, the bewitched peach, which was meant to spark this irresistible, unnatural desire. Then he gives her an unbreakable walnut, a constant, terrifying piece of proof that he had power over the laws of nature itself. And finally, the most intimate weapon of all, his breath, the soufflé, which he later confessed was a demonic gift that could instantly paralyze a woman's will. Each step was a deliberate move to just dismantle her soul's defenses. And this is the crucial concept you have to understand to get what happens next. The court didn't see Magdalene as a willing participant who was just manipulated. They saw her as the victim of what they called a spiritual invasion. In their worldview, her soul had been hijacked. Her free will was magically short-circuited, turning her into a puppet for Gaufridy and his demonic masters. So the crime wasn't seduction. It was a hostile takeover of the soul itself. So by 1609, Magdalene is in a convent. But instead of being a pious nun, she starts showing these terrifying signs of possession. We're talking convulsions, screaming blasphemies in Latin. And this hysteria starts spreading like a virus to the other nuns. The church is now facing a full-blown spiritual crisis. So they call in a specialist, one of the most famous inquisitors of the time, Sebastian Michaelis. He starts these huge public exorcisms, and right there, in front of massive crowds, the demons start to talk. And this part is just incredible, because it shows you exactly how they saw the world. The demons, speaking through Magdalene and another nun, didn't just confess to being there. Oh no, they laid out a detailed, almost bureaucratic org chart of hell. They described this perfect inverted reflection of heaven. Each demon, like Beelzebub, had a rank that corresponded to its former angelic class, the seraphim. Each was in charge of a specific sin, pride. And crucially, each demon had a specific saint who was their cosmic opponent. So Beelzebub, the demon of pride, could only be fought by invoking the saint of humility, Saint Francis. You see? This wasn't chaos. It was a dark, organized system, a perfect mirror image of God's order. Okay, so the testimony from the demons is piling up as spiritual evidence. But the court needs something physical. They need proof on Gaufridy's body. And so they turn to the place where theology, law, and medicine all became one discipline: the hunt for the devil's mark. Now, you have to understand, this was not just folklore to them. The stigma diaboli was, in the eyes of the court, a legitimate medical legal diagnosis. The theory was that when Satan claimed a soul, he'd touch or brand his new property. And this touch would leave a spot on the body that was dead to the world. It felt no pain, and it wouldn't bleed. Finding this mark was considered irrefutable scientific proof of a pact with the devil. So on March 8, 1611, a panel of doctors and surgeons submits their official report, and it is chillingly precise. They found 3 of these marks on Louis Gaufridy. On his left thigh, they inserted a needle 2 fingers deep. Nothing. No pain, no blood. They repeat the test on his lower back. Again, complete numbness, not a drop of blood. Finally, on his chest, they pricked him without warning. Gaufridy didn't even flinch. Their medical conclusion? These numb spots had no natural cause. They were proof of a cause extraordinary, a supernatural origin. In their world, science had just proven the devil's touch. So now they have demonic testimony and medical proof. The final piece of the puzzle is a confession, but Gaufridy keeps insisting he's innocent. So the court subjects him to the question, and that's just a euphemism for torture, specifically the strapado. They tie his hands behind his back, hoist him into the air by his wrists, and just let his body weight dislocate both of his shoulders. Under that unimaginable agony, Louis Gaufridy finally broke. He confessed to everything. And he didn't just say, "I did it." He recited from memory the exact text of a formal pact, a schedule, that he claimed he had signed. I mean, this was basically a written legal contract with the devil. He renounced his protector saints by name and then formally transferred ownership of his body and his soul to Lucifer. And in return for this, he said he was made the prince of magicians and the leader of the entire region's coven. His confession painted this terrifying picture for the court. He described a whole secret anti-religion operating in the shadows of Marseille. He claimed he led a witches' Sabbath, a synagogue, they called it, 3 times a week. And it wasn't just some wild party. It was a highly structured organization with a rigid social hierarchy. You had magicians, who were priests and nobles like him, at the top. Then sorcerers from the middle class. And at the bottom, minions, who did the dirty work, like kidnapping babies. It was, for all intents and purposes, a fully functioning evil church. And the rituals of this dark church were a horrifying parody of everything sacred. Every single Catholic rite was twisted and profaned. Instead of holy water, they used a mix of salt and sulfur. Instead of baptizing infants in the name of the Holy Trinity, they baptized them in the name of Lucifer, Beelzebub, and Leviathan. And then there's the most monstrous detail of his confession. In place of Holy Communion, the body of Christ, Gaufridy claimed the coven would sacrifice kidnapped infants, cook and eat their flesh, and then grind their bones into magical powders. So, let's just recap the evidence. You have a confession extracted under torture. You have testimony from demons speaking through possessed nuns. You have a signed medical report from doctors confirming supernatural marks. And you have the recited text of a signed pact with the devil himself. For the court, this was an open and shut case. Louis Gaufridy's fate was sealed. The sentence was carried out on a single day, with this brutal, ritualistic efficiency. The goal wasn't just to kill him. It was to publicly annihilate his soul. It starts in the morning with the degradation, where the bishop ceremonially strips him of his priesthood. Then, the afternoon, humiliation. He's dragged barefoot through the city for 5 hours. And that evening comes the execution. In front of a huge crowd, Louis Gaufridy was tied to a stake and burned alive, and his ashes were ordered scattered to the wind, just to make sure that not a single trace of the Prince of Magicians would ever remain. You know, the case of Louis Gaufridy is so much more than just a lurid witch tale. It's a window into a world where the lines we draw today just didn't exist. Theology was the law. Medicine was a tool of theology, and demonic possession was a clinically diagnosable condition. This was a reality where the devil wasn't just an idea you believed in. He was a real entity who could leave physical evidence on your body, testify against you in court, and get you condemned to death. This 400-year-old file really leaves us with a haunting question. In a world consumed by absolute belief, where does faith end, and where does collective madness begin?